Hello again. Here on a Memorial Day morning. Happy Memorial Day. Give reverence to those who have given their lives. Okay, well, all right. So I thought about this teaching that I'm going to cover today a week or so ago, and then I forgot about it again, and then I just remembered it this morning. It's actually really interesting. It's a very unique approach to this text and to the stories in the Bible about the creation of right after the creation of the world. Basically the conflict between the Cainites, right, the descendants of Cain. For those of you who may not know your Bible stories, I won't assume. After Adam and Eve are created and they leave the Garden of Eden, right? There is Cain and Abel, right? And there is a conflict between the brothers over the offerings. Basically, God shows respect to Abel and his offering, but for some reason Cain had upset God and and you know didn't accept Cain's offering, and Cain gets upset, gets angry, and he murders his brother Abel, right? The first murder. Okay. And Cain is cursed, and he goes out into the world, and eventually, the Bible talks about he basically founds a civilization. He goes off and he starts his own culture. For David Koresh, this was really important. Cain goes off and founds his own cities and his own culture and civilizations and everything, and basically becomes a race of wickedness in the pre-flood world. This is the antediluvian world, right? Okay, well, so then obviously Abel has been killed, but then there's Seth, and the Bible talks about that Adam and Eve have another son, Seth, and Seth is the one that founds the righteous race, the antediluvian righteous race that goes off, and they have their own society and their own culture and their own. And obviously this is after the fall of man, so it's not that David Koresh taught the Sethites were perfect, but they followed the word of God, such as it was back in those days, and they were more righteous, obviously, than the Cainites. Okay, the Cainites are going down into the valleys, in the cities, right? I mean, the wicked cities, right? And the Sethites are out in the country, out in more of the hill country, more rural, more in touch with the land, and they would have been. I think he taught they were vegetarians. I'm not 100% sure. They had proper diet anyway. That's the thing that was important. Is the Sethite. Let me get my notes here. Okay, so let's talk about this. So let me read the primary text, okay, and then we'll discuss what the interpretation is. So, all right. So the scene is, this is after the fall of man. Obviously, this is after Cain and Abel. This is after Seth is born, the new line of righteous humans that is going to repopulate the earth. But then there's the Cainites, who also exist, and they're off doing their thing. And these two societies are, at this point in our story, separated. Okay. And it came to pass. This is Genesis 6:1. Okay. And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth. Okay, so the population growth is occurring. So what the idea is that these separated communities, where Cain's off in his area and the Sethites, the righteous Sethites, are isolated from the wicked Cainites. Okay, but they're growing, and so eventually they come into contact with each other. Okay. Um, Men began to multiply on the face of the earth. Daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. This has been a text in Genesis that's been speculated about endlessly. It's, yeah. Anyway, um, and the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days. And also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, this is previously mentioned, right? And they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. And God saw the wickedness of man that was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Now, for David Koresh, verse 5 there of Genesis is a direct result of what happened in verses 2 through 4. Okay, but I need to expand, telling you what David Koresh taught about these verses specifically. Okay, so let's talk about that. All right. So, okay, so we have the Cainites versus the Sethites, right? Okay, the Cainites, let's talk about them. So the Cainites live in cities. So all the stereotypical concepts of, I don't know if you remember the I Love Lucy episode with Tennessee Ernie Ford, and Lucy is trying to get rid of her cousin because he's hanging around too much, and she becomes a wicked city woman, right? The wicked city woman, So, yeah, that's the idea. Cities are inherently places of wickedness. So the Cainites live in cities. They're generally wicked. They're more wicked. They have a functioning society more or less, but the women are sequestered. Okay, because of the conflict between men, there's conflict over sexual access. The women are sequestered and protected. They don't work really in fields or do manual labor, any of that kind of stuff. There's conflict over sexual access to women. They were delicate and alluring. The women don't work, so they have their hands are, how you would check someone's hands to see, if you could check a woman's hands back in the day to see if they were a slave or a free woman or something. Anyway, so they wear makeup. They're very provocative. They dress provocatively, Okay, so I think you get the idea. All right, that's the Cainites. Okay, the valley people, the city people, the descendants of Cain. All right, okay. The Sethites. Okay, the Sethites are the descendants, of course, of Seth, the first surviving son of Adam and Eve that is righteous. Okay, he's the replacement for Abel, basically. The Sethites are, as I mentioned, they're more righteous, more obedient to God. They're the ones who are following the will of God such as it existed at this time, right? They live in more in the hill country and rural areas, and the men and women, basically there's equality essentially between men and women. They work together in the fields. Kind of like a kibbutz situation, I guess. It's like a communistic thing in the sense that everybody works together, everybody's equal. Men and women, because they're more righteous, there's no conflict over sexual access. Men respect the marriages to other women. Men aren't trying to, shenanigans with women, and everything's very on the up and up and straight and narrow, so to speak. The women are beautiful, but these are, think of like Amish, I suppose, in the sense of everybody, there's no excess of revealing clothing or makeup or anything like that. The women are just good, solid. Think of like Little House on the Prairie, right? Like it's these are good, solid women who are out there, helping with, the founding of this new civilization of theirs and working together and following the word of God. And it's, you get the idea, right? And they eat the proper diet. The Canaanites are down in there and they're just eating whatever crap they, again, I wish I could go into more detail. I don't remember. Let's just say that the Canaanites are eating horrible diets of wicked foods that they're not supposed to eat. And we'll just leave it at that. And the Sethites are eating the good food and proper diets, and I mean, they probably don't drink, right? They don't drink, they don't smoke. I don't know if Vernon didn't say there was cigarettes back then, obviously, but I mean, they're just living the clean life, and we get the idea, okay? Okay. Now these men are, well, we'll find out, but they're strong. These are because they have proper diets and they practice proper. They get a good night's sleep. Okay, the wicked Canaanites, they're always, they're going to the bars every night. I'm sorry. They're going out, and they're just they're a mess, right? Okay, but the Canaanites, they respect their mother and father. They go to bed on time every night. They kiss their wives goodnight and their children, and everything's great. Okay, so yeah, so this is the picture. But because these Sethites are like they're like supermen, but they don't know it. They're like really freaking strong, powerful men, but they're so humble. Okay, they're like, they wouldn't harm a fly. They're like, yes sir, no sir. Imagine like Superman, but he's just like, no, I don't want to fight you, Okay. But these societies up until this point are rather sequestered. Okay. I'm getting all this straight from David Koresh. This is all stuff he taught. This was back in 83 and 84 when he first was giving studies. This is the kind of stuff he would talk about. Okay. All right. So remember it says here, men began, in verse 1 of chapter 6 of Genesis, men begin to multiply. Well, so as I said, there starts to become a territorial encroachment here as the boundaries of these two societies begin to interact. We have the text that says, the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair. Okay, so let's just take a hypothetical example. You've got a young single son of God. Okay, the sons of God are the Sethites. So say you've got like a young strapping 20-year-old single Sethite, and he's a good boy. Okay, and he's out there, and he's just built his new home right at the edge of the hills here. But wow, just right over there is wait a minute, do I see what is that creature over there? That's like a woman, but she's so delicate and she's so beautiful. He's seeing a Canaanite woman, okay, and she's different, right? Like, cause she's not like one of the So let's, again, we're not seeing one of the Little House on the Prairie women who are pretty, but they've got she's like, whoa, like, oh my God, look at that. And whoa, he's very intrigued, right? And he walks over, he wants to talk to this creature. Well, what is this? This is beautiful, Imagine this very humble, 20, like, excuse me, ma'am, I noticed you, anyway, well, right nearby is a Canaanite. Like, wait a minute, who's that guy talking to my girlfriend or wife, whatever, right? I'm not sure. But anyway, like, man, that Canaanite comes over. What are you doing talking to her? Like, oh, sorry, sir. I didn't mean to offend you. Oh, yeah, like, he starts like, sir. And then the Sethite's like, I swear to God, this is how David Koresh talked about this. And the Sethite, wait, sir, no, stop. Like, no, what are you doing? And then sir, and then like, imagine, just one right hook, and the Canaanites dead, bam, gone. Seth, I say, you know, whoa, what did I do? Did I do that? I didn't mean to kill him. And the Canaanite woman, whoa, because and I had a note here. The sons of God begin to push down out of the hills, and when they saw a Canaanite woman, they're intrigued by their appearance and beauty, a different kind of beauty, right? And would talk to them, just as I conveyed. The Canaanite men are very territorial. They would attack, but the Sethites were powerful and strong, and basically like superheroes, and then they would easily defeat them. Just one blow, dead. And when the Canaanite women saw this, right, they would follow the law of biology. This is superior genetics, right? They would seek after the stronger and therefore genetically superior Sethite men. So now, because of this territorial conflict, this is what happens. The sons of God saw the daughters. So the sons of God, the Sethites, this word gets around, right? And this is on the edge of in the boundary conflict between the two civilizations. And word gets around, and so the sons of God, the Sethites, start to realize, hey, they can go down and just find their pick of the daughters of men, the Canaanites, and they're beautiful, and just they can just do whatever they want. The wicked Canaanites men cannot stand against them in a combat. They just, there's no chance. Okay, and they just take the wives that they want. So now that's what happens, right? God's not happy about this in verse 3. I don't remember what Koresh had any specific teaching about verse 3, so we'll just pass over that for now. But then verse 4, okay? In verse 4, right? Well, so this is what goes wrong. Unfortunately, these Sethite men are obviously a bit corrupted by their newfound power. Before, what was more of a humble, now he's kind of like, I do what I want. And then they got the women who are, and they're having children, right? When the sons of God came into the daughters of men, right, now that they're having sexual relations and getting these women pregnant. The Canaanite women are getting pregnant by the Sethite men. They bear children unto them, right? Became mighty men and men of renown. So in other words, it's a new super race of super wicked. So it's the worst thing, right? It's except that now they're super powerful, like the Sethites, this hybrid race. The hybrid Sethite Canaanite race, super powerful, but super wicked. Okay? Like, and this now becomes the dominant race of the earth. This hybrid race, obviously wicked, just take whatever you want. They overrun everything. They destroy the previous Canaanite civilization, the previous Sethite civilization, and this new hybrid race overruns the earth. And that's why it says in verse 5, and God saw the wickedness of man, that it was great, like just all these wicked hybrid Sethite Canaanite men and of course women, and it's just their new wicked powerful culture is spreading over the earth and destroying everything and raping and pillaging, and it's just super wicked, horribleness. And this is the thing that causes God to be like, oh, man, I'm so sorry I made man, in verse 6, right? Men are just evil all the time and wicked, and everything's, so this first plan, the Sethites have been wiped out, and now we basically have super powerful Canaanites, essentially. So yeah, and that yeah, this is so that's pretty much it. That's what um, that's what David Koresh taught about these verses. So it has to do with clean living and proper diet, which was things that he was emphasizing at the time in when he was starting out. Because see, later on, what's weird, and I don't fully understand it myself, but as the years went by, we eventually didn't really follow health reform anymore. Okay, and David Koresh even smoked eventually. He was a smoker previous to joining the group in '81, but then he quit smoking. Excuse me. But then he took up smoking again after I wasn't around when he was smoking again. But yeah, I think he was smoking. I mean, I would not have predicted that because it's kind of contradicts to me. Okay, I don't. Maybe he in studies I never heard explained it. Whatever, I don't know. But all I know is that this emphasis in the beginning on health reform and clean living and proper diet and women, because the morals as women should dress properly and not be provocative, and all this is in this morality tale that he generated from these texts that I just told, kind of emphasizing the kinds of things that he was teaching at the time, right? In '83 and '84, and yeah, we never, you could get in a lot of trouble for violating the health rules, and I mean, supposedly I did. Like I've told that story before, but anyway. But then there's a really, for some people, would be a rather mundane fact of the negotiation tapes and the transcripts. One of the in the early days of the siege, it might have even been the first day or the second day, February 29th maybe, or maybe the same day. Anyway, because I read this recently, there's a negotiator who's talking to Cyrus, David Koresh's son, right? And at this time he's 8 years old. And one of the things I noticed when I was reading this is Cyrus talks about how he eats Cheetos, right? He likes Cheetos. I read that and I was like, wow. Now you got to understand, okay, for some people, Cheetos, who cares? But Cheetos is like, back in this time that I'm talking about in '83, '84, Cheetos is like the devil, okay? I mean, even in the book, in this book, there's a story about that David Koresh would tell about a relative that ate lemon pie, but Koresh, well, it's not really lemon pie because look at the ingredients and it's got all this. It's fake. It's like eating chemicals. It's bad for you, and that's the body is the temple of the Lord, and so the idea back then was, we practice health reform, which means you try to eat as healthy as possible. And it's not just like your opinion or just because you feel like it. It's a specific practice, which is like I explained in the interpretation of Genesis 6 here, because it's part of being righteous is to eat properly and to respect your body and to treat, because it's your body's like the temple of the Lord, right? The Holy Spirit dwell, all that. And that's actually comes from Adventism. But Adventists don't necessarily teach this specific teaching that I explained about Genesis 6, but yeah, it's like he would take this teaching, he took this basic concept of Adventist health reform and expanded it and emphasized it even stronger, and would criticize at the time Adventists for not more strictly following their health reform doctrines from Ellen White and and like that. So that's why, to me, and I don't fully understand it, I can just tell you that the way it was and the way it turned out, to go from telling stories about eating properly and morality tales of wickedness versus righteousness, and the righteous people practice eat well, and it makes them strong and powerful, and see how the benefits of proper diet versus the weaknesses of wickedness and eating crappy, and you end up with health problems, and you can't even fight and defend your home. Having to do in our real lives with the way that we should eat and take care of ourselves. But then for some reason, by 93, people are eating, his son is eating Cheetos, and David Koresh is smoking. And that's just really surprising. And it actually also kind of makes me angry, because my own wife was persecuted for eating at one point, put on trial, and put out of camp for eating certain foods, and that we're not allowed, and disagreeing with the prophet over what kind of cheese we should eat and things like that, and eating French fries, and my wife committed the sin of eating French fries, but don't tell Vernon, because Vernon knows we shouldn't eat French fries. Right? The true sin is that, in my opinion, what I'm getting, okay, so this is my opinion on what's really going on. Okay, I'll give you my analysis. In the beginning, these rules and regulations are the primary purpose of them are to maintain control, and to give you something to be miserable over. I guess, sort of like a disciplinary test in the group. And it's also about obedience to the prophet. David Koresh wanted people to be obedient. And he also took it very personally if you were behind his back doing something that he didn't approve of. Of course, he would, well, it's really, you're doing it to God, right? That was the idea. And it's a story we haven't really told yet, but my wife, in a moment of weakness, which everybody did this, okay? That's the thing. Even as I told in an earlier story, even David Koresh would have a moment of weakness and go eat steak when he wasn't supposed to. Even the prophet himself would do this. We know this. So everybody did it and then would hide it. So David Koresh is sneaking off to the steakhouse and having steak. He's not supposed to. He's hiding it. My wife is sneaking off and having French fries. She's not supposed to. She's hiding it and telling one of the members, hey, don't tell Vernon I had French fries. She probably meant it jokingly. David Koresh hears about that, and because he hates my wife and he personally offended, all of a sudden he becomes all righteous, indignant. Oh, we're gonna enforce the rules of the camp and get sin out of the camp. So he puts my wife in Palestine, off to the other end of camp. Even though he himself is a hypocrite and is eating steak and secretly and everything, because it's so easy to be a hypocrite when you're practicing a religion. Let me tell you, I know, because I did it too. And it's all just, in my opinion, the whole thing is just a bunch of phony baloney nonsense. It's all just posturing and about power and control. And everybody has this facade of, oh, we want to be righteous and holy. And it's just a bunch of bullshit, okay, is what it is. The whole thing is just a facade over a bunch of ridiculous nonsense, is my whole analysis of that whole period. And all of this, we think we're right, fall on the rock, we used to tell ourselves all the time, and it's just a bunch of crap. And even the prophet himself is full of it, as far as that's my opinion. He's full of it. I could go on with other hypocrisies, but that's the thing, is this forgetting of it. Well, because it evolves, right? We're talking about an evolution over time of the dietary rules, to where at the end, it's always only about what he says is allowed and what's not allowed. Really, that's the point, is as long as you are trying to follow the rules according to what they are at the time. So, in 1993, Cyrus can eat Cheetos. It's fine, because his father said that he could eat Cheetos. In 1983, well, Cyrus was, in 1983, we can't eat Cheetos. Or 1984, Cheetos are forbidden. If you eat Cheetos, you go to hell. In 93 it's okay to eat Cheetos. Like it's just it's whatever, it's a whim, it's whatever. The point is to be obedient, right? Now, so to some people, maybe even today, that makes sense, I guess. You know, to be fair, to obey the prophet, which is something maybe I wasn't as good at as other people. But yeah. Okay. Well, I've ranted enough for today. But anyway, the primary purpose was to let you know about that Genesis 6 teaching and preserve it, and people can, hear. It's interesting. It's an interesting interpretation of the text. Yeah, a lot of people say, well, the sons of God are actually angels from heaven or something, but Koresh actually had a more down to earth approach to it, so to speak. All right. Till next time.